Uh, Hello guys, my name is Shivakrishna and I am here to explain about the topic of Colpitts oscillator. The Colpitts oscillator is exactly opposite to the Hartley oscillator. Where it comes to the Hartley oscillator, it consists of two inductors and one capacitor. When it comes to the Colpitts oscillator, you can see in the diagram it has two capacitors and one inductor. And whereas the amplifier, it is used as a common emitter amplifier. When it comes to the common equation, which is impedance equations, we can see here Z1 Z2 into 1 plus HIE plus Z1 Z3 plus HIE Z1 Z2 plus Z3 is equals to 0, where the Z1 is not directly considered as a C1. Instead of writing the C1, we can consider as a 1 by j omega C1, and when it comes to the inductor, it written as a j omega L. Here the inductor is only considered as single inductor, so we can written as a L. Whereas come to the capacitors, there are two capacitors, so we can consider as a C1 and C2. Now we can solve the equation through this one. You can see here the equation is Z1 Z2 plus 1 plus HIE plus Z1 Z3 HIE Z1 Z2 plus Z3. Now we can substitute these equations in this general equation. So we can get the equation as a 1 by j omega C1 into j omega C2 into 1 plus HIE plus 1 by j omega C1. Where it comes to Z3, here you can see the j omega L in the second part. 1 HIE Z1 comes to 1 by j omega C1 plus 1 by j omega C2 plus j omega L. Now we can solve it here. Minus 1 C1 C2 plus when we multiply these two equations, we get it as a j into j square. It is considered as a minus 1.
Okay.
So we can upside we can write as a minus 1.
Okay.
And omega into omega square, C1 C2. Here we can cancel out the j omega. Here we can get it as a L by C1. And here we written as a 1 by j omega C1 and as a minus j by omega C1. Now we can written as a, how can we written is 1 by j omega C1. Multiply We can multiply j in the numerator and denominator. We can written as a j by j square omega C1. J square, it is minus 1, so it written as a minus j omega C. So this, by this reference, we written as a 1 by j omega C1 as minus j omega C1. And now when it comes to the this side part, here we are not seeing the j part, so it considered as a real part. And when come to the right side part, here we can see that j is present, so it is considered as imaginary part. So first we solve the real part. Consider the real part as minus by omega square C1 C2 plus L by C1. Now here imaginary part is HIE into minus j omega C1 minus j omega C2 plus j omega L. In first equation we can see that is equals to 0 is a, so it is we consider as a equation whole is equals to 0. When transfer this HIF into this side, it get is a 0, and j also get is common and minus also. Now the refined equation is 1 by omega C1 plus 1 by omega C2 minus omega L is equals to 0. Now this minus part will change into right side. 1 by omega C1 1 by omega C2 is equals to omega L. Now LCM omega C1 into omega C2, it is considered as a omega C2 plus omega C1 is equals to omega L. Now we can take it omega common, then omega will get cancelled. C2 plus C1 by omega square C1 C2 is equals to L. Now C1 plus C1 plus C2 by C1 C2 is equals to omega square L. Now here the omega square is equals to C1 C2 by C1 C2 into L. From the imaginary part, solving the equation, we get as omega is equals to under root C1 plus C2 by C1 C2 L. By solving, we consider the real part here. 1 minus 1 by omega square C1 C2 into 1 plus HIE plus L by C1. Here the omega square is present. Here we substitute this above equation, which is get from the imaginary part solving. Minus 1 by C1 C2 by C1 C2L into C1 C2 1 plus HFE plus L by C1. Here C1 C2 get cancelled, and here minus L C1 C2 plus 1 plus HFE plus L by C1 is equals to 0. Here this part will change to right hand side. C1 C2. Here we change L by C1 into right hand side minus L by C1. Here L is present, so they both are get cancelled. And now this denominator part goes into right hand side. It comes as a numerator part. 1 plus HFE is equals to C1 C2 by C1. HFE is equals to C1 plus C2 by C1 minus 1. Now HFE is equals to C1 plus C2 minus C1 by C1. C1 C1 get cancelled. Ultimately the HFE is equals to C2 by C1. So from the imaginary part we get as omega is equals to C1 plus C2 by C1 C2L. By the substituting this imaginary part omega in a real part, we get a HFE is equals to C2 by C1. Thank you.